And today's topic is the past and future of RPGs. All right. Rick, do you want to start with the future or do you want to start with the past?
You should always start with the past because it brings us to the future, right?
All right. What form was the first RPG you ever interacted with, and what edition was it?
So the first form of Dungeons and Dragons I ever started.
Oh, so your first RPG was Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, my first RPG was Dungeons and Dragons. But I was going to say something about what makes a role playing game, right? It isn't just sitting around a table and rolling dice and taking on the role of a character is a traditional RPG. A lot of people probably wouldn't consider it, but I have always considered charades a form of role playing game.
Yeah.
Right? So, or any type of like improv theater or acting is role playing, right? But to gamify it takes us to original RPGs. And my first RPG experience was playing first edition.
Advanced Dungeons & Dragons? First edition, that's it?
Well, I mean, I own the original.
It wasn't the red and blue box? It wasn't the original pamphlets?
No,
wow.
So I also own those. And I did get the red box when it first came out, but the red box didn't come out in 1974.
No.
When these came out, right?
Correct.
In 1974, I was 2 years old. So
I forget you're so young. You're so young.
But in 1982, when I first played my first tabletop role-playing game, it was first edition Dungeons and Dragons. It was with my cousin Troy and his friends. They were 3 years older than me. I was 10 years old, and they're like, we need another person to play. And I didn't know what it was, but they brought me around the table. And it's interesting to note that the role-playing game of Dungeons and Dragons was made by war gamers.
I feel like that's really important when we talk about the future. We're going to talk about it was war gamers who gamified it. Now, there's a real argument that Dana Arneson had much more of this charades, let's tell the story thing. But it was Gary Gygax who codified, who was a war gamer who wanted to know the exact interaction of the miniatures and all those things. Yes. But go on.
Yeah. So, and what's interesting is the influences that they brought or that influenced them to make it the way it was back then. And what a lot of people probably don't know is the Haunted Mansion from Disney World is one of those things that was an influence as to why Dungeons and Dragons played the way it did, besides just being a war game with character, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to, when you ride the ride Haunted Mansion, it takes you into a room, you experience that room. Once that experience has been completed, either through task or travel, you are then taken into a new room, a new encounter, right? And
neat.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of Disney rides, right? So Disney had an influence on what we have with Dungeons and Dragons because of these rides that give you an experience in one room, you experience it, then you move into the next and have a whole new experience with a whole bunch of different other things that it's like a modern day escape room, but without having to do all the puzzles back then. So, and if you want some really good information or good history on Dungeons and Dragons, for those of you watching, if you don't already own it, pick up the Art and Arcana, the Art of Dungeons and Dragons. All right. The beginning of that book is nothing but history, talking about Dungeons and Dragons as far as Dave and Gary's.
There's also a documentary that you could watch on it. It is fantastic.
Yeah. There's in Gary's Basement is a documentary. There's also the Eye of the Beholder, which is the Art of Dungeons and Dragons, the history of the Art of Dungeons and Dragons. That's by Cave Girl Productions. It's on Amazon, so you can watch it there. And it also delves deep into the history of not just the artwork, but also the game itself, which leads into all the other role-playing games that came afterwards. Because as soon as it hit a popularity level, you got Palladium and FASA and all these other companies.
Yes, and why that is so important, and we'll touch on that later today, is I feel like we've hit that popularity for the next explosion, right? And we're definitely going to get there. So your cousin said we need another player, and you were going to play. Did the sky open up, Rick? Did you realize that this was going to be your life calling? Like this clarion bell of nerddom was coming down from the divine and saying, you will be Tabletop Santa, and here it all begins. Now, where in Michigan are you during this particular time? You weren't playing with cousin Troy in Troy, were you?
No. We were in Clare County, in a small little hick town called Harrison.
Yeah, Harrison. Okay, you're up in Harrison doing that kinds of stuff. I was in the bowels of the metro area. If you don't know this about Detroit, it has one of the largest land masses for a municipality in all of the United States. So it's largest by mass. But it also, because of the automotive industry, has the largest urban sprawl. So people can say they're from Detroit and they are 45 minutes downtown for a drive from downtown. And that is reasonable because people, the average commute for a time for Detroit one way was 55 minutes, which was, of course, very weird because that was also the time it would take you to get emergency medical services in the city of Detroit.
Anthony Prime says that they miss Robotech, but maybe not so much the mega damage system, but they miss it. And Monica said that I am the chosen one.
You are. The heavens have opened up, and they want to play.
Yeah. So once Dungeons and Dragons got its initial pop in the 70s, where people started seeing it as a thing that people would gravitate to, and these gaming groups, conventions, all these things started to pop up around the United States around role-playing. That, like I said earlier, is Palladium, FASA started jumping in the, again, late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, let's talk about that time period and where it was available. Okay? Yeah. It was available almost strictly from what is called hobby stores. There wasn't a game store yet. There wasn't a place that sold exclusively games for gamers. You would have it, you'd have to get Dungeons and Dragons and miniature war games. You had to go to the same place where model planes, model trains, and model rockets were available. And I'm sort of interested as the history of early distribution of games across, I feel like I've had a really good sense of early distribution of card games since the Magic era, but there's an early 1970s, how games got to places.
That's a great question. So a lot of the times the games got to their destination points through book distribution, like Penguin Random House, right? Or the magazine distribution system, right? And then there was the larger hobby distribution as well, because like you already mentioned, hobby model cars, model trains, even the miniature wargaming the Napoleonics that already existed, they already had a distribution system set up for that. And a lot of times it was another company within the space that took on the role of, hey, you know what? We'll help you get your game to market, right? And one of those was Chessex.
Really?
Yeah.
What did Chessex do originally? They weren't dice originally, were they?
No, they've always been dice and accessories for war games.
Oh.
So Don, who's the owner of Chessex, started off making the accessories that the players of war games needed: the dice, the containers, the mats, right?
Yeah.
All that stuff. And then the dice became the priority over time because the goblins came in horde.
I need more D6s. I need blocks and blocks of D6s.
No, that would have been hilarious though. He took on a role, and what's funny is one of those locations that he did this out of was in Baltimore, Maryland, and he had which was called the Bunker in Baltimore, and Alliance Game Distributors actually bought that building and was using it as their East distribution hub for many years, up until I want to say it was 2017, because I would drive down to it from the offices at Diamond to go down to the Alliance warehouse, and in 2017 they moved a bunch of stuff towards Red Lion, where they now have their East Coast distribution hub. But again, the distribution of old world games was very interesting, because I found my first Dungeons and Dragons book at a pharmacy.
What?
Yep. I'd go to the local pharmacy. It was like McLaurin's in Harrison, and they had a little section that had like puzzles and small tractor toys, that you would normally find in these drugstores back then. They had their comic book spinner rack.
And it's because of this interaction between your interaction with nerd stuff and pharmacies that ended up making you a corpsman in the service. Like, I can see now the divine rolling a D20 and saying, Rick, this is your life.
That's pretty accurate. I'll admit that I think that playing in the early 80s, the characters that were represented did influence what I wanted to do in my real life, right? I enjoyed playing Rangers in first edition and clerics, and I like the idea of the cleric being the party healer. And then when you're watching the movies and you're like, once you start playing Dungeons and Dragons, you start statting everything. Right? Everything you watch, you start statting it. Oh, that's a cleric. Oh, that's a rogue. That's a paladin. Whatever, right? And when you'd see the clerical types on TV, they're always healing and doing good things and stuff. And I kind of felt like, yeah, that's kind of what I want to do.
Aw, that's awesome. I think I like my history with the Shaw Brothers and like late 70s, early 80s Shaw Brothers obviously is the apex, and so that really, and that's the only place where an Asian kid could see Asian heroes take like a story. So I gravitated to monks, which were instinctively, yeah, but yeah, I don't think my brothers as much. But
Agony Prime in my chat says that it absolutely was a human behavior and psychological course as well.
Yes, it was. All right. So did you have a moment with mazes and monsters and any parental units or any, if people don't know, this of course is Tom Hanks's best movie as the cleric who gets confused, who confuses real life with their game of Dungeons and Dragons, which is mazes and monsters. The punchline to that movie is great. It is almost a very 70s punchline to a movie at the end. It was all part of this hysteria about how Dungeons and Dragons was destroying the youth of America. I'm like, God, I wish it was that powerful. But did you have that moment?
So I've never had that moment where personally I was confused between game and reality. Like
no, I'm talking about the movie. Like you had to interact with people who had made assumptions by the power of Tom Hanks's performance.
No, absolutely. So again, you're also talking about the time when it's called, the Satanic Panic, right?
Yeah,
was a big thing, and so yeah, when that movie came out and people knew that I played the game, they asked questions.
Like what?
My aunts would be like, "Do you worship Satan?" No, I play a character that wants to defeat Satan. I go, and they'd be like, "What do you mean?" I go, "You want to defeat Satan?" I was like, "Don't you?" Right? And it was so funny because they thought that these were all influences. When in the game, and how I play the game is you're good, you're heroes. You're playing heroic characters to do heroic things. You're not in there to be like, "Oh, I'm a lawful evil. money grabbing capitalist here in the city of wherever, and or what. No, we're here to do heroic things and do good deeds, and that's how I like to play my games.
All
And
right, so I think that's the point. And I would wonder if somebody has done a study of evil characters are the birth of the one shots. Like people can play campaigns of, doing heroics and doing good things. But, just like when they choose to teach people to shoot rifles for warfare, like the natural instinct of a human being is to shoot up above their head. It's not hurt another person. And so for that exact same thing, like, yeah, people can take a moment to play, but then they can be over it. And I think the one shot was literally like started to emerge from the fact that people could be a villain for a short period of time or a betrayer for a short period of time. But that was just sort of a palate cleanser so they could go back on their heroic adventure.
I think that's true, especially if you can get someone who can come in and actually play the bad guy for you, right? Which is always fun to see when, as a dungeon master, you're sitting there running your characters through those scenarios, and then when you get to the big bad, you go, "Oh, by the way, I'd like you to meet so and so who will be actually playing the big bad." Because what's kind of cool about that, it gives a little bit of separation for the dungeon master, right? And gives that character, it lets the players know that this character isn't stupid. They're going to do everything in their power to do the bad stuff to you, so you better be on your A game. And it puts a lot more dynamic into the game. I think that is so much fun. But again, you're not doing it because you want to be evil. You're doing it because it's a story, and you're trying to tell a story and have fun with your friend.
Right. So. And evil characters in fantasy, sci-fi and fantasy situations always end up in a really horrible place. They've done horrible things. Oh, yeah. And even as a player, you eventually get to a limit and you're like, yeah. And so I think as Dungeons and Dragons relates to other types of media, and particularly now, and we're going to seed this into the story, like somebody already mentioned Robotech, this being the hero of the universe, the Luke Skywalker, the Lin Min May. Not the hero of Robotech, but I wanted her to be. Roy from Robotech. It dies horribly. Like, this idea that you're the center of the universe by your actions and your heroics is very much a shonen or an adolescent fantasy, right? And any complaints about Star Wars from long-term fans are the galaxy's more than one family. We even needed more than one Mandalorian to happen for everybody to get excited. Just give us somebody who's really not related to the Skywalkers, and we can get excited again. Let's just give it to us. Just give us this thing. But it also teaches you moral questions of the Satanic Panic aside, and also the fact that all of the original founders of Dungeons and Dragons were Jehovah's Witnesses or ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Dungeons and Dragons brings up moral questions, even if it's on the periphery. And I think it's done its job again, bringing a light to things that were inherently wrong with the system that we had internalized that was not acceptable. I think one of the changes in the latest system of Dungeons and Dragons to de-evilize people based on being an orc or a goblin or whatever it is a good choice.
When it comes to goblins and orcs and other bugbears even, that were all originally just nemesis and bad guys and considered evil races, right. I like the idea that they aren't. Right?
Yeah.
But they can still be evil.
Right.
Right. So if someone's playing a game and the orcs that you're encountering are evil, don't be like, well, they could be good. Well, they might be, but this particular band of orcs is evil because they worship an evil god and they follow an evil path.
I really want people to at least ask themselves that question, right? Before engaging in murder hoboism. Please do this thing. back to the point, because a lot of the TikToks that I do and are like being in the industry, making your games and making it happen. And one of the things about making a game is getting it sold. And RPGs are its own subgroup of gaming, and indie RPGs are even a smaller. Like, it was a weird thing that happened this year. We're gonna jump to present time. Zine Month is a thing that happens on Kickstarter, and they moved Zine Months to be on top of Gen Con. And it created conflict in that community. It created a lot of stuff. There are a lot of people interested in writing indie RPGs. Like the thing that Dungeons and Dragons does well goes to its core and has, again, it is a medieval and fantasy combat simulator distilled for ease of use and accessibility. Okay. It doesn't have any mechanics for you to interact with another person, with your social skills. It just basically uses a really blank system where you throw dice and some level of extra things may or may not. But there are other role-playing games that do this. Wander Home this year won a whole bunch of, and its premise is we're going to take all the things in D&D that's your normal skill set to solve things, which is killing things and stealing things. And what if we take all of that out? What kind of like adventure can you have? And the answer is it's weirdly satisfying. It's actually super duper 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 good. Really but to that point, how games used to be distributed, we had this era from Hobby Store, and then up from it through book publishers, it ended up in Toys R Us, and it ended up in Walden Books in the mall. Those were the most accessible places for this, that were the most widespread that people could find some stuff. But if you wanted like more indie or established stuff, you were still going back to the Hobby Store that then would have your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which would keep these things in stock, everything Osprey. All this stuff, it was happening. When did we see the birth of the game store? When would you think that became an everywhere phenomenon?
So I think the birth of the game store came around like between 92 and 94. Like the absolute hardcore game stores. Right.
And you're saying Magic the Gathering made the game store. You're literally just saying Magic the Gathering made the game store happen.
It did.
Okay.
It did. Because if you think about it, a lot of comic books, it was really the comic book stores that morphed, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of comic book stores were struggling in the late 80s, early 90s until Image hit and Valiant hit in 92, right? And then they got a nice little like rise again, and then this weird card game shows up, and a lot of these comic book stores did carry some games, right? But Magic shows up and it just blows everybody away, right?
Do you remember who the original distributor for Magic was? I know locally, like ACD was one of the first carriers here in the Midwest, but and Alan talks about it.
Alliance was one of the first as well.
Yeah, the comic book people also brought anybody who was carrying this over here, but also this.
Right. So they brought that into their stores, and when the gamers started gravitating towards them, and they started asking for dice and sleeves and Dungeons and Dragons and other board games, the store owners started bringing it in because it was a source of revenue. And I know many comic book stores that are still around from that era that are 80% games to 20% comics. And a lot of the comics were just trade paperbacks and graphics instead of the weekly flops. So it's really an interesting way how it dynamically switched. And then, of course, I want to say it was probably about because we're really in our like adolescent years as a gaming industry when you think about it.
You mean
Maybe.
now we are, or in?
Oh yes, we might even be creeping into our teens when
Do
you
you
think
think
about it.
so?
As the way,
I liken where we are now to for computer games and the bubble bursting. I think we finally gotten to the place that we're big enough and there's enough money to for computer games and the bubble bursting. I think we finally gotten to the place that we're big enough and there's enough money that, people need to be humans to each other, right? You need to not worry about crunch time. This big organization, you need to actually pay people a decent wage. People are trying to make a living. We have celebrities in our space, and those celebrities are doing good or bad things.
maybe we could be considered our college years, our early college years.
Yeah, no, we could be in our late adolescence or our early college years. It probably is somewhere in that. I like that as an analogy. That being said, so we are talking about the emergence of game stores and the cross-pollination of Magic the Gathering, introducing people to. Hey, Danny's here. People to other games like Dungeons and Dragons, and we're gonna see this again. So, what happened in 2003 that killed or almost killed a lot of game stores?
Was that when World of Warcraft came out?
Yes, it's World of Warcraft. No, World of Warcraft, I talk about the decimation and birth of gaming in multiple scenarios. And one of the things that ended up happening that nearly killed all game stores was Worlds of Warcraft ate an entire generation of gamers' life for a year. It claimed, on average, 1 full year of all their gaming time. Just boom. But after that happened, it created so many more gamers. It was like a forest fire. Like, if you survived that, then people were trying to figure out more stuff. Like, if we're going to talk about, like, important moments in history and important moments in Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing and where role-playing comes from, we talk about the birth of Dungeons & Dragons. We talk about the spread of Dungeons & Dragons. We talk about the Satanic Panic. We talk about the birth of Magic the Gathering. And we talk the huge boon of gamers into and focusing on World of Warcraft. Because right after that ends up happening 3.5, the open source system, and everybody ends up writing for it. And right after that happens, there is 4th edition. Yes! So moments in Dungeons & Dragons are this weird schism. Like, following software, following the .com era, the boost, and being caught up in the success, but then all products dying because of World of Warcraft made them jettison in the direction of 4th edition, but simultaneously they opened up their IP, which made Pathfinder happen, and then a bazillion people from Atlas to FFG started making role-playing supplements that just everybody was buying. Everybody was participating in Dungeons and Dragons again. It was a place that you could go to on your own customized adventures after you left Azeroth. It was great and it was glorious. And then its bubble burst in 2008.
So when 4th edition hit, here is my thoughts on 4th edition.
All right, I'm listening. I'm getting my drink. Keep on talking.
I played it. I enjoyed it.
I played it. I enjoyed it.
Now, if they would have called it anything else other than Dungeons and Dragons, that system would have been amazing.
Or they had called it something tangential to Dungeons and Dragons. Like, have you ever played Star Wars Risk?
Yeah, of course.
Star Wars Risk is actually this game here.
Yeah. So if they would have called it anything other than Dungeons and Dragons, if they would have called it Tunnels and Trolls, Castles and Crusades, or anything else,
they could have called it Dungeons and Dragons Tactics.
That would have probably been better.
Yeah,
because of what we know is the community, that the old school community, the grognards, who had been playing up through 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and everybody that really like delved into 3rd and 3.5 were upset because they were trying to make a game that mimicked the actions of Warcraft.
Yeah, massive multiplayer online.
And the flipping of your powers and the turning and all that stuff. They were, and of course, up in arms. The world's ending, you know, it's just blah, blah, blah. It's how it always is. It's how, I mean, there's already talk about that with 1D&D. There are people that are up in arms. And it's like,
let's talk about that. We're into the topic now. So we caught up through 2008. There's a huge dump. Like all the indie RP, the people who are making decent money in indie RP, like supplements for Dungeons and Dragons. That market just, when the economy like folded in on itself, the quality of product was low. People like jettisoned this kind of stuff. The appetite for it had evaporated. And so when do we see this massive upsurgence and this Critical Role happening? Was it with Dan Harmon and Harmon Quest that then burst Critical Role? Like, when do we see Dungeons and Dragons? Is it the birth of podcasting that made it happen? Like, when do we see this return, this resurgence to Dungeons and Dragons again?
So I think with the coming of 5th edition, it wasn't a like avalanche. I think it was a little bit of a slow trickle, right? Mm-hmm. And what I think really put it
what
back
year was what year did 5th come out?
I can tell you real quick.
Is it 2018?
No. I don't believe it was 2018.
There was a period of time where a lot of people came to me and say, "Hey, 5th Ed, it's good." I'm like, "Really?"
2014.
No way.
Yeah.
I would have not. Wow, 5th Ed is coming up on 8 years or 9 years.
Yeah.
Wow, so I would not have thought that's the case.
5th edition is when we're going to get 1D&D.
Wow. Yeah. That is mind-blowing to me, because I don't think it was until like 2018 that people wanted to start talking to me on the regular that said, "Do you know 5th edition's pretty good?"
Yeah, it took, like I said, it didn't immediately become the windfall that it has become.
People were salty after 4. Right. And people were having fun with 3.5 or Pathfinder or both.
Oh yeah, they were all salty, and there are still many that are, which is fine, right?
Yes.
Be salty.
Be salty.
The thing I think that brought it to the forefront wasn't so much Critical Role at first, but Geek and Sundry.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which is where Critical Role got their start, was at Geek and Sundry.
Yep.
And Geek and Sundry was already doing Dungeons and Dragons content and other RPG content around their tables. But yes, when Critical Role came into the space and started doing, and it wasn't just because it was Critical Role. It was because these individuals, Matt Mercer, and all the others, I can't even think of all their names.
It's all good.
Right.
Yeah.
They all brought something to the table besides they played Dungeons and Dragons. They had huge fan bases around their voice acting careers in the anime space. So a lot of the anime kids were like, "Holy crap, they play that game. We should check it out." And
talented people bringing their talent to this particular landscape. And we're seeing a lot more of that. And that's also crossing over to board games as well. Like Grant Lyon is a force because Grant Lyon is a performer. Like, at first, and then also he's a board game nerd, right? It's a thing. And we're seeing more and more people who have like full careers wanting to bring, like Henry Cavill wants people to know, by the way, I play Warhammer.
In every interview he talks about it. Right?
Yeah.
And even photographs of him traveling between wherever he might be going for work. He's got the Black Order or whatever, the novels, the Warhammer novels sitting like in view. He's like, make sure you get that in view in the camera, right? Or whatever. We want people to know that, he is a geek. And that's
locally on Twin Cities Radio, Chris Kalouy used to do a Chris Warcraft like constant thing to let people know. And he, after Warcraft played out, he was still then just talking about miniature gaming. And he actually miniature gamed at the previous incarnation of Tower Games. So those guys used to play with Chris Cluey, which was really exciting. They were like, hey, dude, be cool about it. Chris Cluey's coming into play. It's super fun. But this idea that, like, no matter who you are, you can have a private life and a fantasy life that is even better than, and I assume Henry Cavill's characters all just sit around a lot, drink and eat a lot, and like, I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna eat I'm not gonna pick up the sword and swing it unless I have to. Don't make me do it.
I don't like guns. Why don't you like guns? Bad things happen when I get around guns. What kind of bad things?
All right, so Geek and Sundry is producing quality content, and they give this platform over to people who had other talents who made it approachable. Right. And so this brings us to our current environment. And if you said anything about the pandemic made people stop and figure out other things that they could do or things that they wanted to do with other people. And gaming exploded during the pandemic. Board gaming, TTRPGs. I think Roll20 got a lot more traction because of the environment that we were in. And that leads us, of course, to 1D&D. Bum, bum, bum. So, all right.
So it was about a week and a half ago they announced all the new stuff with Magic and Dungeons and Dragons, and 1D&D was one of those things that was announced, which is super exciting because they talk about it being backwards compatible, right? So you can use 1D&D so that you can play and you can use it with every other edition before that. Funny thing is, that's always been the case. That's going to be very interesting. And the first, and so if you
still no one is buying it, Rick.
That's okay. They don't have to. They don't have to buy it. But here's the thing. I can go and I can grab a first edition module.
Yep.
The Ghost Tower of Inverness.
Yes. And I can Secret of Saltmarsh. The Temple of Elemental Evil.
Yep. I could take any one of those and run it as a 5th edition game right now.
Yeah.
Because all you have to change is the stat blocks of the creatures that you're encountering and the conditions in which things are successes or failures.
Right.
I don't even have to go and do that. I can literally just run the game and be like, oh, you're encountering,
You are also an accomplished GM and mega nerd, and so you have invested in the skills to be able to do that without any extra effort. And people should not dismiss. It's like when they have an artist come and do something for them. The artist does something that they could do in seconds, right? That it would take them hours upon hours, and they're like, "Why did I pay you? It only took you seconds." Well, do you know how many years of training went into Rick being able to read a stat block in first edition and make an appropriate counter for his team?
Yeah, and convert it to a 5th edition encounter. It's magic.
It's magic.
So on D&D Beyond, which Wizard of the Coast recently purchased, they have the play test going on for 1D&D, and the current. The first thing that you can play test or go through is character origins.
Oh.
Right? It's a 21-page character creation guide, which will be part of the player's handbook, which will be out in 2024. And what's really interesting about this, because we're almost at our hour time. Are we going for an hour? Or going
we got 10 minutes.
Okay. So the cool thing about the origins is, unlike picking a race because the race has the better stats, it doesn't do that anymore.
No.
It's you pick your race, then you pick your background. Your background is going to give you the stat bumps that you want for your class, which I think is brilliant, because an elf who has a +2 dexterity may want to be a sorcerer who needs charisma, right? So they're going to put their energy into the thing that gives them better charisma or that thing. And I like the fact that you get your stat bump from your background. The thing that you dedicated your life to, you studied into. to become the class that you now are. And I think that's great. So, and then there's a new race in here that is very like celestial. It's called the Ardling. Supernatural beings who are either born on the upper planes or have one or more ancestors who originated there, and their bright souls shine with the light of immortal beings from the upper planes, which I thought was kind of an interesting. They have exalted, heavenly, and idyllic traits. This is like, wow.
I see this as like a Lego for telling a story. If you wanted to make one of these characters part of a campaign, like figuring out how much of that campaign is supposed to go, like obviously we talked about adulthood. Adult schedules are the death of all role playing. If you had not realized it, what kills your campaign isn't a lack of interest or bad choices by your players. It is adult schedules that kill your campaigns, and adult problems. But like, starting in a new place with a new thing to expand on stories that you've never done before. It seems like Spelljammer is doing well, which I never thought would be like something that got like Space Wizards is strictly for Jedi, but like it would have been one of the properties that I would have always been very excited to do, but would never thought it would return. But when I asked the people at Tower, the staffers who are like 25 and under, who Spelljammer is for versus who Dragonlance is for, and they're like, Spelljammer is for me, Dragonlance is for people over 50.
That's a great answer, and they're not wrong.
No, they're not wrong. The most exciting thing about Dungeons and Dragons proliferating is the fact that just like we talked about these other explosions in gaming, it's going to inspire people to tell stories differently and add diversity to storytelling. We're going to have different systems happen. I think that 21 pages of character creation is a great idea, and I think it is massively influenced by some of these indie RPGs that are coming up. Like Wanderhome. Wanderhome is almost entirely about how you make your character and how your characters interact with each other, creating a list, like a checklist of story items that you want to role play into the situation. So me and Rick share this background element. I want to get this background element front and center in this scene. Oh, I did that. I'm going to tell him. And you just have all these lists of things. And the character generation creates those story ports meaningfully. And I think that's great. I think that's super duper, duper, duper exciting.
So we touched a little bit on 1D&D, but in our last 5 minutes, I actually would like to ask you a question. Of all the indie RPGs that are out there from your past, or even like you may be familiar with today, what are 5 of your favorite indie RPGs?
All right, are we considering the FASA ones, the Palladium ones, the White Wolf ones? Are we considering those indies or no?
Anything that isn't frickin' D&D.
Anything that isn't frickin' D&D.
Yeah, because D&D has causes such a big noise blast. Literally everything else is secondary.
I think I spent the most time, if it's like in modern history, I've run more D&D, but before Worlds of Warcraft, I think I ran more Shadowrun than anything else.
It's a great game.
I loved Shadowrun. I loved the fact that it had a resurgence of magic, and people who were whatever ethnicity suddenly became dwarves and elves and so forth and whatnot. I liked the idea of returning magic and mystery to native peoples of the Northwest. I love that. I also love the Blade Runner, rainy, like all that stuff mixed together. It was a perfect thing for me. Speaking of economies, one of the things I always tried to make happen but never got to have happen was a significant mech warrior campaign. Battletech has such amazing history through pre-clan, post-clan, all this kind of stuff. Playing a mech troop that's out there fighting on the front lines collecting bits of stuff just so they can sell it to just get going to the next. It is extremely Firefly. Like, if you ever wanted to know, like, this cowboy, we just need to be able to pay for ships to take our stuff off world. Right. And we're going to fight in these campaigns, and it gives us reasons to play the tabletop miniature game. I loved, like, Mech Warrior was so amazing. One of the ones I always wanted to do as a full campaign, as far as indie lore was, did you ever get a chance to do Chill?
I did not.
So Chill was a role-playing game you could play once. The revelation of who your characters are as it runs out of the campaign and you play the story. Chill had always been on my list as things that I was like, oh yeah. Let's see. Gamma World original, like, as far as throw dice, lots of talk in and there. I did write my own in the 90s about being a martial arts fighter. It is great. I've never published the rules to it. It's still fantastic. It is the thing that got me to start writing games again. I made a card, dice, whatever it is, and that kinds of stuff. So I started doing that pretty early. Let's see. And then, of course, I did my time in the White Wolf games, but not as you thought. I did them as MUDs. Yeah. I did the World of Darkness as MUDs, and I loved it. Lord, the game I would have, if you said, Seppy, I'm going to run this campaign, do you want to play in it? It would be Ars Magica.
Oh, that's a great game.
I would just stop whatever I'm doing to play in your Ars Magica game. It is crazy. For those folks who don't know, you're playing a near immortal wizard, but not only him, but his cadre of people that need to support him. And in any one story, if you had a band of players together, these would be wizards who share like a tower or a group begrudgingly. And only one of the person would bring their magus. Everybody else would then probably play one of the support characters in and around the cadre. And that game, it's filled with weird, terrible magic. Yeah. And as far as like games that nobody ever talks about anymore that I loved and I spent a lot of time in, Talislanta. Talislanta was legit. The world was so weird.
There's a Kickstarter launching for a 5th edition compatible Talislanta.
Talislanta.
I want to say in the next 30 days. You'll see.
All right, Rick, you and I should join forces to do the Thundar or is it Hanna-Barbera was Thundar?
No, it was Ruby. I can't remember the name. It's something Ruby something, but it is now owned by Warner Brothers.
Yeah, I would like to do the worlds of Ruby whatever. Like that, like, oh my God. I would love to do a Thundar role-playing game. Like post-apocalyptic, I think is in. Post-apocalyptic sword and sorcery, I think would be in. Like super science. Yeah, I want to be a mock. I want to be a mock so bad. You want
to be a giant cat person?
What about me doesn't say I don't want to be a giant cat person? All right, Rick.
Before we sign out, I wanted to do a shout out to a couple of companies that are doing amazing jobs with indie publishing. Ninth Level Games. If for anybody watching right now, if you are not familiar with Ninth Level Games, you should check them out. They do a system called Polymorph, which is amazing. Hunters Entertainment with their Kids on Bikes, Kids in Capes, Kids on Brooms are amazing indie published games. And then I would also say that anything that Monty Cook Games is putting out right now is also really, really spectacular. And the fact that they are now an OGL game system under the Cypher system, meaning anybody can create content and publish it using their OGL in the Cypher system space, is only going to help that company grow much larger as well. There are so many other amazing indie RPGs out
I'm
there.
going to give a shout out to one more, our TikTok buddies. Deernicorn is making fantastic objects with role-playing games wrapped into them. For those one-off role-playing experiences or that curated private moment that you connect, I would definitely look at them. Also, shout out to diversity-owned businesses, Magpie. I love Mark and his group. They've made it, obviously, with Avatar and other kinds of stuff, but they're still fantastic people. I would also give that shout out. All right, Rick, tabletop.